Hello and welcome to Niche References, where I yap about my niche interests so that I don't annoy my friends and family with them. My name is Chris, and today I'm going to once again be yapping about my favorite TV show, The Genius. I'm halfway through a mini-series where I rank each season's main matches and players, and today we're doing the main matches of Season 3, Black Garnet. I'm once again using the same criteria as with the other main match rankings, and I'll run through it very quickly. First, game design. Is it easily breakable, or will it usually lead to interesting strategy? Second, how did this iteration of the game play out? Was it exciting gameplay, or did the players choose the boring, safe strategy? And finally, my own personal bias. Did I like the game? Did I find it compelling? This is the third one of these that I've done. You know the drill at this point. Let's jump in. This is a season where it's very easy to pick the last place game, and it's obviously Constellation game. In this game, players attempt to collect stars to complete constellations. They're given cards numbered 1 through 5, which they present each round. The number determines both their order and the number of stars they're allowed to collect. Anyone with overlapping numbers cannot collect any stars in a given round. The first person to complete 3 of their constellations is the winner, and the loser is the player at that point who has completed the least constellations and has the least points. I explained the rules just now, but I'm not even entirely sure all of those rules are correct because most of them are irrelevant to how this game plays out. On multiple occasions, I've done a rewatch of Season 3 and have been stopped in my tracks mid-season because I did not want to watch this game. Constellation game has one of the more obvious game breaks across the entire series where 5 people can team up and completely ice out 2 players. At this point in the season, Hyunmin and Dongmin have been absolutely dominating, so of course the other 5 players teamed up against them and iced them out. And I can't fault them for doing that. It was basically their only move and clearly the best move to make. It truly is a don't hate the players, hate the game situation. But when you're rooting for Hyunmin and Dongmin, it's really painful to watch the entire arc, especially given that Hyunmin was the first one to mention this strategy, only for Dongmin to discount it and then have it used against them. They then start doing a bit of a good cop, bad cop routine where Dongmin is circling the set like a shark hunting his prey, trying to intimidate the other players into flipping. It can be a little bit hard to watch at times because of how raw the emotion seemed. Dongmin seemed so angry. So it kind of has the perfect storm of terrible. Very breakable design, plays out in a very predictable way, and the players I was most rooting for were targeted. Easy last place. Moving on to the next one, second to last was also pretty easy for me to choose because I simply don't like it. And that is Doubting Yutnori. In this game, 4 eliminated players return and play a game of Yutnori. Each player still in the game is paired with an eliminated player randomly. The eliminated player rolls a die to determine their moves, but can lie about what they rolled, and the players still in the game can decide whether or not to doubt them. Successful doubts remove that player's pieces, while failed doubts make the genius player pay up a garnet. The current players can also bet on their partner winning or not, as well as on whose pieces they think will finish next. The winner of the main match is determined entirely by who has the most garnets at the end of the game, and the other 2 players are sent to the death match. Right off the bat, I am never glad to see any version of Yutnori back because I feel like it almost never makes for an interesting game to watch. But on top of that, this game concept feels incredibly half-baked. Only allowing the players to bet on the person they're paired up with to win is a huge element of chance being thrown into the game, especially in circumstances like this where the players don't match each other well, and especially when it's near the end of the game. And the format of the betting makes it so that no one is ever really going to bet a lot on the eventual winner of the game because they're forced to only bet on their partner, which is a strange and, in my opinion, really poorly thought out rule, especially when that's the way that the most garnets can be won, because you can bet up to 10. And on top of that, having 4 guests but 3 current genius players feels really random. I understand that they needed to have an even number of players for Yutnori itself, but why play it here when there's an odd number of genius players left? Why not play it at like 4 instead? The logic isn't logicking. And as I've said before, I'm typically not a fan of outside guests coming into the game, but generally when it's previously eliminated players, it's not so bad. And usually that would be the case, but in this game, we have Kyung-hoon. I'll tip my hand a bit here for some future rankings, but I don't like watching Kyung-hoon play the genius. I recognize that he provides an added level of randomness for players to work around and have to strategize around, which can force a higher level of strategy, but that doesn't mean I enjoy watching it. Watching Hyunmin trying to reason with him when Kyung-hoon refuses to bend to any level of reasoning at all is a deeply upsetting experience to me in a way that kind of feels like being gaslit. And Hyunmin can't really do anything about it because he was randomly paired with Kyung-hoon. The doubting element of the game is interesting and I'd like to see it reworked into something else, but as it stands, this game just adds too many huge factors of random chance into the game at the absolute worst possible time when the finale is on the line. Speaking of doubting games, at number 9 I have a game that I actually have a bit of a soft spot for, and that's Sword and Shield. In this game, players are divided into 2 teams, each with a team leader. Each team is given a variety of weapons and shields and will secretly equip one onto each of their arms. They can lie about what they have, but if they're doubted and did lie, they're eliminated. A player also dies if they're unable to defend from an attack because shields can only take 3 points of damage. The goal of each team is to kill the leader of the opposing team, and the winning team will pick the deathmatch candidate from that other team. If I were making this list purely just based on my own personal preference and nothing else, this one would definitely be a bit higher. I always enjoy a game with a hidden identity element, and I also enjoy the doubting element of this game. I think it's a really cool game in concept. But the way it played out this time was that both teams very quickly identified and started attacking each other's team leaders, and the game was almost never going to reach a full round. In the game explanation, they clearly expected this game to go on across several rounds, but they literally only made it halfway through a single round. But I think the way it played out this time is kind of the way it's always going to play out. I think anytime this game is played with players who already have some level of familiarity with each other, they're going to be able to read each other well enough to identify the team leader. Dongmin shows his extremely high level of perception and intuition here to be able to identify Yeonsung very quickly. But on top of that, in games with hidden identities, we've consistently seen that people tend to give themselves away. But in most of those games, there's at least still another element of gameplay on top of just identifying them. This one, however, boils down to find the leader and attack them until they die. So it's almost always going to end very quickly. There are definitely a lot of very fun elements to this game, most notably Yeonju not understanding the game at all, and the hilarity of Dongmin trying to explain it to her. I'm very fond of this game, and I think it's a fun one, but I fully recognize that it's definitely not one of the better designed games. I think it says a lot about the quality of this season's main matches that we're already to one that I think is actually a very solid game that I just like a little bit less than the others remaining, and that's investment and donation. In this game, players are given money which they will use to either invest or donate across 9 rounds. If you invest the most in any given round, you get a major shareholder badge. If you donate the least, you get a miser badge unless you're also the top investor. The player who has the most miser badges at the end of the game is the deathmatch candidate. There are a lot of things I like about this game and think are really compelling. I like that it ends up being a leveling war in the same way that Black and White 2 as a deathmatch kind of is. There's also the aspect of the bills not being able to be broken down into smaller amounts, which didn't end up playing the biggest part of this time, but it's an interesting aspect to have to work around. Personally, when I first heard the rules of this game, my first thought was to not even bother with investing and just donate every round. Probably not a great strategy with so few people left in the game at this point, and therefore such a high chance of being picked for the deathmatch, but it's definitely one of those teacher cha simple strategies to be safely in the middle. But if this were like the first or second main match, yeah, definitely just donate all of your money and never worry about investing. My main complaint about this game is just in the way that it plays out this time, because it essentially devolves into a race for last place, which is less entertaining than seeing people actually trying to come first. I feel like we either missed part of the plot or Hyunmin and Dongmin screwed up a bit, because it was their plan to make Dongmin last place, and it would have been very easy to do so. He could have very easily just gotten a miser badge every single round. But then they start trying to give everyone a major shareholder badge in their alliance, and Hyun is able to sneak in and get more miser badges than Dongmin. I'm not exactly sure what they were thinking there, what the logic behind it was. We don't really have that explained unless I missed something. In the end, this is a solid main match, and on a different season it might rank a lot higher, but it's in season 3, so it's not one of the more fun ones, and it ranks a little bit lower. Next up, I'm actually going to be talking about places 6 and 7 together because they're essentially the same game. I have both Middle Race and Middle Race 2 here. They're mostly tied, but if you want me to be technical about it, I'll put Middle Race 2 in 7th and the original in 6th. In the original Middle Race, the players each take on a role chosen from a list of various roles with various abilities. They use cards numbered 1 through 4 in order to move in the race. The first and last place finishers will go to the death match, so it's everyone's goal to place somewhere in the middle. The game then returns later in the season with some changes in roles and is played with a guest from the players' real lives. In this version, the 2 players who land directly in the middle placements get tokens of life and choose a deathmatch candidate from among the other players. Personally, my favorite thing about Middle Race is the roles, because I think they say a lot about the person choosing them. So let me know in the comments which role stood out to you. On my first watch, I thought silence was the coolest at first glance, but I think it would actually be a little bit more aggressive than I would want to play. But given that the loser can't retaliate much because they can't choose their deathmatch opponent, I might actually consider it. At this point, I think my preferred role would actually end up being 1, because it allows you to stay safely in the middle on your own volition, which also means you can team up with whoever you want. And then something like reset or maybe even with would be my second choice. With the options in the second iteration of the game, I think copy is the obvious standout, but I'd also be content with reset again. I think the clear downside in Middle Race is that the interactions between the roles are so confusing and hard to follow that it took ages to get through it, and even Dealer Hong was struggling a couple of times to actually keep up with what was happening. I'm actually torn between which iteration of the game I prefer. On the one hand, I generally do prefer games without guests, and I like that the original comes early in the season where people are able to fluidly work together solely based on their roles. But I think there are some roles that are not as balanced, and therefore it's easy to force them into first or last place, like Union and Jump, which is how it played out that time. I think the second iteration of the game fixes some of these balance issues. But at that point, not only were alliances fairly solid, but each person had someone who was there explicitly to help them, so the strategy was a lot more rigid. I did find it compelling to see the game play out in a much more serious, heavily strategic way, where the players really had to find loopholes to force the roles to work into their pre-existing alliances. So I am really torn between the two versions, but I think I do ultimately prefer the original. I think this game isn't super popular among fans, but it's definitely one I have a bit of a soft spot for. And honestly, the more I sit here thinking about it as I'm talking, the more I'm like, yeah, actually, let's just go for silence. Let's take it and run with it. Am I secretly Huijong? At 5th place, I have a game that I think I rate a little bit lower than some people. I have Fruit Stand. In this game, players are each assigned 2 fruits which they will sell. If everyone offers the same amount for a given fruit, they will all sell their fruit at that given price and earn that money. But if a person undercuts the others by offering less than everyone else for a given fruit, they will earn all of the money offered by everyone selling that fruit. Players are also given the opportunity once per game to either change their fruit or to hide the selling price of a specific fruit. The person who earns the least amount of money at the end of the game is the deathmatch candidate. I think some people have this as their favorite opening match of a season, but I think this might actually be my least favorite to this point in the Genius. It's still a fantastic opening game, but the 1-2-3 game is a perfect first game, and Food Chain played out so perfectly. And I am glad that this one is an opener instead of coming after people have developed allies. Regardless, Fruit Stand is an excellent game with one of the best twists of the season. As I said, I usually don't like watching Kyung-hoon play the Genius, but I do enjoy him here. I really hope the camera director who did the dramatic zoom in on him got a raise or some sort of award for that camera work, because that was a piece of artwork all on its own. The game itself is one of those games that on first description didn't really sound that interesting to me, but it ends up being a very layered game strategically and ends up playing out in a very fun way. There's a degree to which it's a leveling war, but the element of being able to change fruits to get in another team's way is also really compelling. This main match also gives us some excellent foreshadowing into the future of the season, because most of the people that Dongmin will ally himself with in the early game are watermelons with him, while nearly all of the strategists who will make deep runs into the season are in the ragtag other team of misfits teaming up against the watermelons. And although Hyunmin is a watermelon alongside Dongmin, he's the one who's asked to betray the watermelons, and he eventually tries to turn the tables on Dongmin. This main match is very fun to watch when you know the full context of the season. My favorite moment is when Dongmin calls Hyunmin an idiot who only knows how to study textbooks. It's such a beautiful moment of irony. Once again, another moment in the Genius that feels scripted but isn't. Next up, I have Chain Auction. In this game, Jinho and Sangmin return as guests, and everyone is chained together in a row around a table. The players are each given a secret number and must use that number to complete an equation equaling 10. The closer to 10, the more points you earn. Each round, players bid to be the first person to choose a tile to add to their equation, and the rest of the players will select in a counterclockwise order, starting with that person. After all the equations are complete, everyone is given the chance to guess each player's secret number. Correct guesses will give the guesser 3 bonus points and take 3 points away from the guessee. The player with the fewest points at the end is the deathmatch candidate. This is perhaps the one time in Genius history where I have 0 complaints about guests, because I'm always happy to see Jinho and Sangmin back on my screen. And to be honest, I feel like they blended right in and didn't really feel like guests. Maybe I'm just very biased though, who knows? They seemed to mostly fall into pseudo-alliances based on where they ended up sitting at the table, and largely seemed to be self-interested, which I think is made clear by the fact that Jinho ends up winning the game. It's also really interesting to see Sangmin and Yeonsung sitting next to each other in the corner scheming, when they're people you wouldn't immediately assume would pair well with each other. This is also a game where we get a very clever, although a bit understated hack. A quirk to the rules here is that instead of rounding, decimals will simply just be removed. Hyunmin was a math student at the time, and I believe now is some sort of math instructor or lecturer, so he almost immediately was able to identify the way to use the decimal rule to his advantage, to create an equation to equal 10 while still obscuring his secret number and allowing him to take nearly any number without issue. It's perhaps not the flashiest solve ever, it's not open pass where your jaw's on the floor, but he figured it out so quickly, and its near perfect efficacy is really brilliant. On the flip side, unfortunately, this game also presents Dongmin's lowest moment of the season, where he fully forgets to take order of operations into account, and has to make a very quick last-second switch that almost makes things worse for him in a way. It's certainly not his proudest Genius moment, but he does come back from it in glorious fashion once his mind starts working again. This is once again just like a very standard type of Genius game that's always going to be solid and interesting. Anytime players are like betting on tiles and forming equations, it almost always seems to turn into an interesting game. And Hyunmin's very clever hack on top of that, and the fact that Jinho and Sangmin are here, which gives us all 4 of my personal Mount Rushmore Genius players all in one room, just ends up elevating this one into the very top tier of this season. In third place, I have put Stormy Stock Market. In this game, players are given information on the fluctuation of several stocks over set amounts of time. They're only allowed in the dealer room to sell and buy for 40 seconds at a time, so they need to appropriately time their trading so that they can buy low and sell high. The player with the least net worth at the end of the game is the deathmatch candidate. I brought this up before when discussing Scamming Horse Race, but I love these Battle of Information games because it forces players to use both their social politicking and their strategic abilities. And I think this one strikes a perfect balance between those two. Because technically you could have every single piece of information and still end up in trouble, because maybe you couldn't get into the dealer room at the right time or stocks were completely sold out. It's a Genius game that's really simple in design and easy to understand, but requires a lot of skill to actually navigate well. On top of that, this is our first real cards up Hyunmin and Dongmin alliance game. Their partnership is hidden at first in minor game, but this game really highlights the way that they're secretly sharing information with each other. I love the way that they do dead drops for each other, allowing them to have all of the information without ever having to actually speak to each other, and allowing each of them to get information that people actively didn't want them to get. They are forced out into the open with the auction mid-game, but it does give them a bit of a leg up at the beginning when everyone else is still trying to find their footing. This is also just one of many main matches this season where Hyunmin just showcases an overpoweringly dominant understanding of the correct strategy. It's absolutely masterful the way he's able to leverage his information to get Jongbum and Yeonsung on his side so that he can nearly always enter the dealer room exactly when he needs to. The element of timing and going in and out of the dealer room was an aspect that I think a lot of players overlooked, and he identified it early and navigated it really well. Overall, this game just ends up being very fun, and it's always very entertaining to see good players playing at the top of their game. Speaking of great players playing at the top of their game, these top 2 games of the season are genuinely 2 of my favorite Genius games of all time, and it was so hard to choose between them. But in second place, I have in fact put Jury Game. In this game, players are assigned as either criminals or citizens, and each team secretly has a leader. The citizen leader learns all criminals except the leader, and the criminals all learn each other but not who their leader is. Regular citizens, of course, don't learn each other's identities. One by one, players can appoint a jury made up of increasing numbers of players. The players all then vote whether or not to approve the jury. When a jury is voted in, each person on that jury must vote either guilty or not guilty. A guilty verdict gives points to the citizen team, while not guilty gives points to the criminal team. Best of 5 rounds is the winner. However, the leader of the losing team is allowed the opportunity to guess the leader of the opposing team. If they're correct, the outcome of the game is reversed. The winning team chooses the deathmatch candidate from among the losing team. In the past, this was my favorite game of the season, and it's still a very close race, and it might still be my personal favorite, but I think I have to admit to myself that the game design of the one I've put in first place is better. Regardless, I think that this main match gives us one of my favorite moments of the season, and I would argue that Hyunmin's performance in this game as the citizen leader is the single best game performance by anyone across the entirety of the Genius. And yes, before you ask, we have now turned the corner into me just cards up being a Hyunmin stan account. I'm so sorry if you were expecting or hoping for otherwise. The way he was able to get all of the criminals to trust that he was just a regular citizen by acting like he trusted them was both a great plan and brilliantly executed because seemingly none of them suspected him. And the moment when all of the criminals get together to strategize and Hyunmin realizes that he now knows who their leader is and can purposely lose the rest of the game is so much fun to watch. You can quite literally see the light bulb turn on above his head as he has a full body glitch trying to explain everything to the rest of the citizen team. It's such an excellent TV moment on top of that entire flashback showing everything he did all game to earn the criminals' trust. I also love that we get another so perfect it seems like it's scripted moment because the criminal team is made up almost exclusively of the people you would expect to be on the criminal team. Lawyer Kang, Yoo-hyun, Kyung-hoon, and Jongbum. And on the other hand, the citizen team is made up almost exclusively of all of the biggest Dongmin loyalists. It's just such a perfect turn of events. I love this game. I love games like this and Zombie with secret identities, and I think that it has one of the best twists in this season and possibly in the Genius overall. And there's only one game this season that can overtake it, which of course means that I have put Minor Game in first place. In this game, players are divided into 3 teams to mine minerals of varying amounts. They have to stick their hand into a mine and pull out the minerals without seeing them. Before a team mines, the other teams declare the amount of points they want to earn. If a team mines enough to satisfy the other team's requests, the other teams get their requested points and the excess goes to the mining team. If the mining team mines less than the other team's requested, they split points amongst themselves, and the outside player who asks for the most points instead loses their requested amount, while the person asking the least gains those lost points. If a team mines 3 bombs in a round, their mining is a bust, and the other teams earn whatever they requested. The person with the least points at the end of the game is the deathmatch candidate. This main match has absolutely everything. As I've stated, I love a hackable prop in the Genius, and almost more so when the prop isn't even meant to be hackable, and the players find a way to do so anyway. Dongmin being so fussy and sensitive, and therefore finding the bombs incredibly easy to identify, is such a cool reveal. It's also really fascinating to see the level to which other players seem to be able to tell the difference. Because Hyunmin seems to also be able to identify them, and Jongbum can also tell the difference. Yeonsung can sometimes feel a vibe, but no one else seems to be able to identify them. And on top of the flashy part of the game, the strategy of it is also really interesting. It's another leveling war to a degree, which is always fun. There's also the wrinkle of being forced to work with the other players on your team to mine, while really having to work with people outside of your team strategically in order to ensure your victory. And once again, the layout of the teams couldn't be more perfect. Team 3 is Dongmin and crew. Hyunmin and Yoo-hyun are kind of most crafty players of the season are on the same team. And then the third team is the team that I like to refer to for some reason in my own mind as the little cuties, because Jongbum, Yeonsung, and Yeonju are on that team, and all 3 are kind of just loyal, steady, trustworthy players who aren't going to be underhanded or backstab someone they've decided to work with, and they kind of just end up working as a team even though that's not really what they're technically supposed to be doing. I don't know, there's just something very earnest about all 3 of them, and I just have such a soft spot for each of them. So therefore, in my mind, it's just a team made up of little cuties. I don't know, don't question it. Anyway, this game is also a major turning point of the season because it's where Hyunmin and Dongmin first work together. And the twist of them working together is so well hidden and then revealed in such a fun way. Seeing Dongmin shielding Hyunmin from losing points and then ultimately gifting him 50 points, and Hyunmin doing the same in return for Dongmin's team. The entire thing from start to finish is just so excellent. The mining is entertaining to watch, the strategy is really interesting, and the Hyunmin-Dongmin team up and ultimate reveal is always a great time. There's also just something really delicious about knowing the reveal of the Hyunmin and Dongmin alliance is coming and feeling that anticipation building up as you're rewatching it and getting hype for when it will finally come. It's just so much fun. It's almost more fun on a rewatch than it is to get that reveal the first time. Perfect scores across the board for this game. I absolutely love it. So those are my main match rankings for the Genius Season 3 Black Garnet. I found myself a lot more torn on some of these than I thought, and I actually flipped some around while I was ranking this, although my top and bottom placements were pretty obvious from the start. Coming next up are my player rankings for Season 3. For once, I'm going to say that I think this one is actually going to be very straightforward for me. I love this cast. There are so many excellent players this season. I think this is the most densely packed season of players I love, and I do think they divide pretty cleanly in half in this season, if that makes sense. Hopefully the minute fiddling doesn't prove to be trickier than I expect. Also, I've created a playlist on YouTube for this mini-series. All of the rankings I posted so far are in there, and this one will be as well. So definitely go check that out if there are any that you haven't seen or listened to yet. So if you enjoyed this ranking and want to be updated when that next one drops, please go ahead and follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're currently listening on. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you click the bell so that it will actually notify you when that ranking does drop. You can also follow me on Instagram if you want to be kept up to date with the upcoming content, and also I post stuff on my stories sometimes while rewatching The Genius and getting really hype about it. The link to that is in the description. And as always, thank you so much for listening to me as I made some niche references.